Julius Caesar was born into the patrician Julii family, a lineage that carried prestige but little wealth. From the very beginning, the world seemed to whisper possibilities into his ears: power, influence, and the intoxicating allure of legacy. Even as a boy, he displayed a keen intelligence that made his tutors marvel and his peers wary. Where others saw games and frivolity, Caesar saw lessons in human behavior, opportunities to learn who could be trusted and who could be used. As a young man, he moved with a fluid charm through Rome's elite circles. He knew how to smile in the right moment, how to nod respectfully while silently calculating his next move. Every banquet, every public ceremony, and every casual conversation was a stage on which he tested his skills. Caesar's charisma was magnetic, and yet there was something in his eyes that hinted at ambition far beyond ordinary aspirations. Friends were not merely companions, they were instruments, and enemies were not merely obstacles, they were warnings of the cost of misjudgment. Caesar's early career in the military exposed him to the harsh realities of power and loyalty. Serving in distant lands, he learned to inspire men not just through orders, but through respect and shared risk. Soldiers who fought alongside him admired his bravery, his ability to make split-second decisions, and the rare moments when he shared in their hardships. These early campaigns were more than a proving ground. They were a laboratory for Caesar's mind, where he studied strategy, politics, and the fickle nature of human allegiance. Yet even as he gained military experience, Caesar's political instincts were equally sharp. He understood the labyrinthine Senate, the nuances of patronage, and the delicate dance of public favor. He sought not only offices but the visibility that came with them, carefully choosing which debates to join and which alliances to nurture. In private, he plotted, whispered, and bargained, always aware that the smallest misstep could be fatal in Rome's treacherous social landscape. At home, whispers of scandal and rumor swirled around the young patrician, but Caesar had learned early how to turn perception into advantage. A discreet alliance here, a favor there, a timely act of generosity or cunning, all were threads in the tapestry he wove to climb higher. No lesson in loyalty or betrayal was lost on him. Each encounter, each conversation, each fleeting glance was data to be analyzed. By the time he reached the prime of youth, Julius Caesar was no longer merely a nobleman with potential. He had become a calculating presence in Rome, a man whose ambition radiated through every gesture, every word, and every choice. Behind the charm and the easy smile was a relentless hunger, the desire not just to succeed but to dominate, to shape the city of Rome, and ultimately to leave a mark that would outlast even the Republic itself. The world was vast, and Caesar's eyes gleamed with the certainty that it would bend to him if he played the game well enough. Rome was a city of ambition, whispers, and shifting loyalties, and Julius Caesar knew he could not rise alone. By 59 BC, he had achieved some recognition in political and military spheres, but the corridors of power demanded more than talent. It required allies, and more importantly, leverage over rivals. It was in this precarious landscape that Caesar conceived a bold, audacious plan to form an alliance so unexpected that it would shock the Senate and give him a foothold over the Republic itself. The First Triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey the Great, and Marcus Licinius Crassus, was born not from friendship but from necessity and mutual ambition. Pompey, celebrated for his military victories, desired land for his veterans and political validation for his triumphs. Crassus, Rome's wealthiest man, sought influence and the backing of popular legislation to protect his commercial and political interests. Caesar, though ambitious and brilliant, needed the combined force of Pompey's fame and Crassus's wealth to push his own political vision forward. Behind closed doors, the trio's meetings were electric with tension. Each man understood that while the alliance could elevate them all, it was also fragile, held together by convenience rather than loyalty. Caesar observed every glance, every pause, every subtle gesture, with meticulous attention. He knew that any misstep could ignite jealousy or spark betrayal. In a city where allegiances shifted like desert sands, even a trusted ally could transform overnight into a dangerous adversary. Publicly, the triumvirate presented an image of unity. Laws were passed, political maneuvers executed, and victories claimed as collective achievements. Yet beneath the surface, Caesar maneuvered with surgical precision. He cultivated networks of supporters, subtly undermined rivals, and used the alliance to expand his influence while keeping a careful tally of debts owed and favors granted. The interplay of ambition and strategy became a performance, with Caesar orchestrating events as if every action were a move on a grand chessboard. Whispers of betrayal were never far from Caesar's mind. He had learned early that in Rome, power was a feast, but one where the diners often sharpened knives under the table. Trust was a currency, but one that had to be spent wisely, for the price of miscalculation was ruin. Even Pompey and Crassus, men whose strengths complemented his own, were watched with suspicion. Every conversation, every alliance, every seemingly casual encounter could harbor hidden threats or opportunities. By the end of the Triumvirate's early days, Caesar had achieved more than mere political alignment. He had mastered the subtle art of manipulation, the delicate balance between camaraderie and control. He had positioned himself not only as a key figure in Rome's power structure, but also as a man capable of bending circumstance and men alike to his will. The stage was set, the players in place, and the city of Rome, vibrant, volatile, and hungry for spectacle, was about to witness the rise of a man who would not merely participate in history but command it. Caesar's ambitions could not be confined to the marble halls of Rome. They demanded a battlefield. In 58 BC, he set his sights on Gaul, a land of fierce tribes, dense forests, and unpredictable rivers, a place where Rome's might had often faltered. To many in the Senate, Gaul was a distant concern, a wild frontier. To Caesar, it was a canvas upon which he could paint his legacy, a proving ground where strategy, cunning, and charisma would elevate him from a rising politician to a legend. From the very first campaign, Caesar demonstrated a blend of audacity and intellect that left both his enemies and his soldiers in awe. He understood that victory required more than brute force. It demanded adaptability, intelligence, and the ability to inspire men to achieve what seemed impossible. In the heat of battle, he moved alongside his legions, sharing their hardships and displaying personal courage that made even the most skeptical soldier believe in the invincibility of their commander. The Gallic tribes were formidable foes. Vercingetorix, the greatest of them, employed guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and scorched earth strategies, refusing to surrender to Rome's encroaching legions. Yet Caesar, ever meticulous, adapted with a combination of diplomacy and relentless military campaigns. He forged alliances with some tribes, exploited rivalries among others, and meticulously planned sieges that showcased both tactical brilliance and psychological mastery. Every victory, no matter how small, reinforced his growing reputation, not only as a general, but as a man whose destiny seemed written in the stars. Back in Rome, Caesar's reports from Gaul arrived like tales of myth. His eloquence in letters to the Senate painted him as a defender of Rome, a man expanding its glory while securing wealth and honor for the Republic. Yet beneath the surface, every conquest served a dual purpose: to amass loyal soldiers who would follow him unquestioningly, and to increase his personal influence in a city increasingly wary of his ambitions. Soldiers admired him, citizens envied him, and senators feared him. The delicate balance of Caesar's ascent was both celebrated and condemned. In the winter camps, long after the battlefields fell silent, Caesar reflected on power, loyalty, and the fragility of alliances. He understood that victory in Gaul was only the first step. Rome itself was the ultimate prize. Every decision he made, every strategy he executed, was a thread in the tapestry of a future he was determined to shape. The land of Gaul, harsh and untamed, had forged him not only as a commander but as a master of men, a man whose ambitions now threatened to eclipse even the Republic itself. By the end of these campaigns, Caesar had become more than a military genius. He was a figure whose presence commanded attention and whose ambition demanded scrutiny. Rome watched warily as he returned each year with triumphs, gold, and stories of conquest, sensing that the man who had tamed Gaul was a man destined to challenge the very foundations of the Republic. The fragile equilibrium of the First Triumvirate was shattered in 53 BC with the sudden and shocking death of Marcus Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome. His passing left a void that could not easily be filled. A delicate balance of power toppled, and the remaining partners, Julius Caesar and Pompey, found themselves on opposite sides of an ever-shifting political battlefield. What had once been an alliance of convenience now teetered on the edge of rivalry, suspicion, and open hostility. Pompey, a hero of the East and a man accustomed to adulation, began to distance himself from Caesar. Once friends and allies, they now looked at each other with the sharp eyes of competitors, measuring ambition against ambition. Pompey had grown wary of Caesar's immense popularity, both with the soldiers he commanded and with the Roman people who cheered his victories in Gaul. In a city where perception could dictate life or death, Pompey saw a rising shadow that threatened to consume his own influence. The Senate, long uneasy with Caesar's growing clout, became a fertile ground for tension. Senators whispered of Caesar's ambition, painting him as a danger to the Republic itself. They courted Pompey, hoping to turn him against his former ally, and subtly encouraged the narrative that Caesar might aspire to kingship, a word so venomous in Roman politics it could justify assassination. Caesar, ever perceptive, recognized the web forming around him but refused to be intimidated. He understood that in Rome power was won not just through military triumphs but through cunning, alliances, and the ability to manipulate perception. Caesar faced a choice that would define his destiny: to submit to the Senate's increasingly hostile demands and risk diminishing his authority, or to assert his power decisively, even if it meant plunging Rome into civil war. The stakes were nothing less than the future of the Republic itself, and Caesar's mind worked tirelessly, weighing every potential move, every possible betrayal, and every fleeting opportunity. Meanwhile, the Roman populace, captivated by Caesar's successes and wary of Pompey's growing alignment with the Senate, became a battleground in their own right. Public opinion, fueled by carefully crafted speeches, pamphlets, and subtle displays of generosity, could tip the scales of power. Caesar used these tools masterfully, positioning himself as the champion of the people, even as he navigated the treacherous currents of elite politics. By the time the tension reached its climax, Caesar and Pompey were no longer allies but adversaries bound by history and ambition. The cracks in their relationship widened, whispers of betrayal grew louder, and Rome itself braced for a confrontation that seemed inevitable. Every political maneuver, every negotiation, and every calculated display of loyalty now carried the weight of potential catastrophe. In the shadows of the Senate and the bustling streets of Rome, the stage was set for a conflict that would shake the Republic to its very core. The winter of 49 BC in Rome was unusually tense, the air thick with rumors of rebellion, betrayal, and looming conflict. Julius Caesar stood at the banks of the Rubicon River, the narrow boundary separating his province from the city of Rome. Behind him lay the legions he had meticulously trained, soldiers loyal not to the Senate, but to him personally, men who had followed him through the forests, rivers, and battlefields of Gaul. Ahead lay the city of his ambition, the heart of power he had long coveted. With every heartbeat, the weight of decision pressed upon him: to cross or to retreat. To step beyond the Rubicon was to commit an act of war against Rome itself, a declaration that the Republic's laws no longer constrained him. Caesar understood the gravity. He knew that once he crossed, there would be no turning back. His political allies and enemies alike watched with bated breath. In private, whispers of fear and intrigue spread through the Senate, as senators debated whether Caesar's ambition could be stopped or whether the Republic was doomed to be consumed by civil war. The march on Rome was calculated yet audacious. Caesar moved with precision, sending messengers to allies, gauging the loyalty of governors and generals, and positioning his forces strategically along the path. Every step was infused with the knowledge that betrayal could strike at any moment. Old friends might abandon him, rival generals might rally against him, and Pompey, the former ally turned adversary, was already mobilizing to defend the city. Yet Caesar's resolve did not waver. He had weighed every risk and deemed them surmountable. As he led his troops across the Rubicon, the tension was palpable. Soldiers marched with solemn determination, aware that history would remember this moment forever. Caesar's mind, ever keen and calculating, anticipated the chaos that would follow, and the subtle plays he would need to orchestrate to secure victory. Even in that decisive instant, he considered alliances, betrayals, and public perception, knowing that battles were not won by swords alone but by strategy, influence, and the loyalty of men. The phrase "alea iacta est," the die is cast, echoed in Caesar's thoughts as he advanced. With the crossing, the Republic entered a stage of unprecedented uncertainty. Rome's streets, palaces, and forums would soon be swept by the tide of war, where friend and foe alike might fall to ambition, cunning, or miscalculation. The die had been cast, and Julius Caesar, ambitious, brilliant, and unyielding, had chosen a path from which there was no return. The die of history was in motion, and the fate of Rome hung precariously in the balance. By the time Caesar's forces approached the city, it was clear that a new chapter of the Republic had begun, one defined not by tradition, but by the relentless pursuit of power, where cunning, courage, and ruthlessness would determine the outcome of history itself. With Rome under his control, Julius Caesar transformed from military conqueror into the singular authority of the Republic. By 49 BC, he had been declared dictator, a position he would hold in various forms until his death. The streets of Rome buzzed with whispers of awe and fear. The people marveled at his accomplishments, yet senators muttered darkly about the concentration of power in a single man's hands. Caesar, however, moved with a deliberate combination of charm, intellect, and audacity, determined to reshape the city and its government in ways few could imagine. One of his first acts as dictator was to implement sweeping reforms aimed at stabilizing Rome and enhancing his authority. He restructured the calendar, creating a system that would bring order to the chaos of time itself and leave an indelible mark on history. He addressed debts, redistributed land, and extended citizenship to provinces previously ignored by Rome's elite, carefully cultivating the loyalty of the people and soldiers alike. Each reform was a calculated maneuver, designed not only to benefit Rome, but to tighten the web of influence he held over its citizens. Yet while his public persona radiated magnanimity, Caesar's private strategies were no less ruthless. He monitored the Senate with an ever-watchful eye, rewarding the loyal and subtly undermining the obstinate. Senators who opposed him found themselves isolated, their voices diminished in a city increasingly dominated by Caesar's presence. Alliances were scrutinized, every conversation noted, every gesture analyzed for hidden meanings. Caesar understood that power required both awe and fear, and he wielded both with careful precision. Beyond politics, Caesar's ambition extended to perception itself. He staged triumphs that dazzled the populace, parades filled with spoils of war and captives, demonstrating the reach of his military genius and the inevitability of his dominance. Every public appearance, every speech, was meticulously orchestrated to reinforce his image as Rome's indispensable leader. And yet, even as he basked in the admiration of the people, he remained acutely aware of the simmering discontent among the elite. Power, he knew, was never absolute. It had to be maintained with vigilance and cunning. Within Caesar's inner circle, whispers of his larger ambitions circulated. Some believed he aspired to monarchy, others that he sought to become a godlike figure above the Republic itself. While he never openly declared such intentions, his actions, reforms, alliances, and carefully staged victories hinted at a vision that extended far beyond the temporal gains of office. His dominance was both political and psychological, a masterful blend of innovation, intimidation, and spectacle. By the time the city settled into this new order, it was clear that Julius Caesar had consolidated power as no Roman had before. He was not merely a dictator, he was a presence that redefined what authority meant in the Republic, a man whose ambition, brilliance, and audacity had made him both revered and feared. The stage was set, yet beneath the apparent triumph lurked a web of jealousy, tension, and envy that would soon threaten to unravel everything he had achieved. Despite Julius Caesar's unmatched power and popularity, a storm of conspiracy was quietly brewing in the shadowed corridors of Rome. Senators who had once spoken deferentially now muttered with venomous fear and resentment. The concentration of authority in one man had upset the delicate balance of the Republic, and whispers of betrayal grew louder with each passing day. Every conversation in the Senate, every gesture in the Forum seemed charged with unspoken tension, a city holding its breath, knowing that the next moment could shatter the fragile peace. The conspirators were a diverse and dangerous group. Some were men of principle, convinced that Caesar's ambition threatened the Republic's very foundations. Others were motivated by envy or personal ambition, seizing the opportunity to strike at a figure whose brilliance had eclipsed them all. Brutus, once a trusted ally, became the symbol of moral conflict, a man torn between loyalty to Caesar and devotion to the ideals of Rome. Cassius, cunning and resentful, fed the fires of fear and hatred, persuading others that Caesar's death was not only justified but necessary. Behind closed doors, plotting was meticulous. Meetings were held in secret, oaths were sworn, and alliances were formed with a whisper and a shadow. Each conspirator calculated risk, weighed loyalty, and imagined the chaos that would follow. They discussed timing, method, and location, understanding that one misstep could cost them their lives. The conspirators' hearts were heavy with both fear and exhilaration, fear of failure, exhilaration at the thought of changing history with a single, decisive act. Meanwhile, Caesar moved through Rome, seemingly oblivious, yet ever perceptive. Friends and advisors flattered and warned him, some with genuine concern, others with subtle attempts to influence his judgment. The Ides of March approached, and the city felt an almost imperceptible tension, as if the streets themselves anticipated the coming violence. Caesar's charisma and authority remained unmatched, but shadows gathered around him, shadows born of jealousy, fear, and the relentless pursuit of power by those closest to him. In the days leading up to the fateful Senate meeting, the conspirators worked like artists, crafting a masterpiece of betrayal. Every step was calculated to ensure that when the moment arrived, there would be no hesitation, no escape. Rumors of plots and mutterings of treachery floated through the city, but Caesar's public confidence never wavered. He moved as though destiny itself protected him, yet the die of fate had already been cast, and the tension in the air was electric, an unspoken promise of violence that would erupt in a single historic day. As Rome slept the night before the Ides, a chilling sense of inevitability settled over the city. The conspirators' plan was complete. The stage was set. Soon, the world would witness the clash of loyalty, ambition, and morality, and the Republic would tremble under the weight of a man's unchecked ambition and the fatal consequences of those who dared challenge it. March 15, 44 BC, dawned over Rome with a deceptive calm, the city unaware that its streets would soon be soaked in both betrayal and blood. Julius Caesar, the man who had commanded armies, swayed the populace, and reshaped the Republic, arrived at the Senate unaware that the culmination of years of envy, fear, and political maneuvering awaited him. His gait was confident, his mind focused on the business of the day, yet the air was thick with tension, as if the walls themselves whispered warnings too subtle for him to hear. The conspirators had gathered discreetly, each one carrying the weight of both conviction and dread. Brutus, torn between admiration for Caesar and devotion to the Republic, struggled with the burden of his role in what he considered a necessary act. Cassius, by contrast, radiated a cold, determined resolve, having meticulously orchestrated the plan with ruthless precision. Others, fueled by jealousy or ambition, moved silently, knowing that hesitation could unravel everything. Each dagger, each whispered instruction, was part of a choreography of betrayal designed to end the life of Rome's most powerful man. As Caesar took his seat among the Senate, the conspirators surrounded him under the guise of respectful conversation. The first strike came almost without warning, a glint of steel in a hand that had once shaken his in friendship. Shock rippled through Caesar as the realization hit. Trust had been weaponized, and loyalty had been transformed into lethal force. One blow followed another, the Senate chamber erupting in chaos, voices screaming, senators lunging, some attempting to intervene, others frozen in disbelief. The man who had conquered Gaul, outwitted rival generals, and commanded the adoration of the people, fell victim not to armies but to the intimate treachery of men he had once called allies. Outside the Senate, Rome trembled. Citizens, unaware of the precise nature of the conspiracy, sensed the sudden disruption, the tension and confusion spreading like wildfire through the streets. The death of Caesar was not a victory, but a spark that ignited uncertainty, fear, and unrest. Rome's political landscape, already fragile, was thrown into immediate crisis. Who would seize power? Who would avenge the fallen dictator? The answers were unclear, and the city braced for the storm that was sure to follow. Caesar's body, lifeless on the Senate floor, became both symbol and warning. The conspirators, though momentarily triumphant, understood that their actions had unleashed forces beyond their control. The Republic, already teetering, now faced a perilous uncertainty. Every Roman citizen, from the wealthiest patrician to the humblest plebeian, became witness to the end of an era and the chaotic beginning of a new, unpredictable chapter in Rome's history. The Ides of March had arrived, and with it, the city learned a brutal lesson. In Rome, ambition and power were inseparable from betrayal and blood. The streets of Rome, once alive with celebration of Caesar's triumphs, now throbbed with tension and fear. The assassination of Julius Caesar had left a vacuum the Republic was ill-prepared to fill. Senators, conspirators, and ambitious generals alike scrambled to claim power, each move calculated, yet every action fraught with danger. The Republic teetered on the edge of chaos, a fragile structure shaken to its core by the sudden absence of its most dominant figure. Immediately, divisions became apparent. The conspirators, led by Brutus and Cassius, believed they had restored the Republic by eliminating Caesar. Yet the city did not rise in unanimous gratitude. The populace, loyal to Caesar and inspired by his reforms, rioted in the streets. Shouts of vengeance echoed through the forum as anger and fear mingled, turning once familiar neighborhoods into battlegrounds. Temples and public spaces became stages for both protest and panic, the heart of Rome pulsating with uncertainty. Meanwhile, Caesar's allies, loyal soldiers and trusted politicians, quickly mobilized. Mark Antony, the fiery and charismatic consul, seized the moment, rallying supporters and turning public sentiment against the conspirators. His speeches, delivered with passion and cunning, inflamed the masses, transforming grief into fury and creating a groundswell of loyalty that threatened the fragile plans of Brutus and Cassius. Every day became a contest of strategy, propaganda, and intimidation, as factions vied to fill the void left by Caesar's absence. The vacuum extended beyond politics into the military realm. Provinces that had once been firmly under Caesar's command now became contested territories. Generals and governors maneuvered for advantage, raising legions, forging alliances, and preparing for inevitable clashes. Rome, the city that had long symbolized order and authority, had become a stage for ambition and bloodshed, where every decision could trigger a cascade of violence and betrayal. Civil war loomed as the Republic fractured. The streets were no longer merely pathways for citizens, they became front lines in a struggle for survival and supremacy. Senators debated furiously, alliances formed and dissolved overnight, and cities across the Italian peninsula teetered between obedience and rebellion. Fear, suspicion, and ambition intertwined, ensuring that no quarter of Rome remained untouched by the turmoil. Amid the chaos, one truth became clear: the Republic could not endure in its current form. Caesar's death, meant to preserve tradition and safeguard the state, had instead accelerated its collapse. In the blood, confusion, and relentless power struggles, Rome was being reshaped, setting the stage for the emergence of a single, unifying authority. What had begun as vengeance had evolved into a battle for the soul of the city, and only the most cunning, determined, and strategic could hope to survive. In the wake of Julius Caesar's assassination, Rome was a city consumed by uncertainty, violence, and ambition. The Republic, already weakened by years of internal strife, now teetered on the brink of collapse. Amid the chaos, a young man emerged from the shadows, Gaius Octavius, later known as Augustus, Caesar's adopted son and heir. Though inexperienced in comparison to the seasoned generals and politicians who roamed Rome's streets, Octavius possessed a combination of intelligence, patience, and cunning that would allow him to navigate the treacherous currents of Roman politics and shape the destiny of an empire. Octavius returned to Rome with a careful, deliberate strategy. He understood that brute force alone could not secure his position. Loyalty, perception, and manipulation of public sentiment were equally vital. Using Caesar's legacy as a foundation, he presented himself as the rightful heir, invoking the memory and honor of the fallen dictator to rally both the people and the army. His speeches were measured, appealing to Roman pride, tradition, and fear of further chaos. Slowly, support shifted toward him, and those who had underestimated the young heir began to realize that he was a force to be reckoned with. The path to power, however, was far from straightforward. Octavius had to contend with Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal and ambitious general, as well as the remnants of the conspirators, who sought to reclaim authority and preserve the Republic. Civil war erupted across the Italian peninsula and beyond, as legions clashed and cities became battlegrounds. Octavius, despite his youth, demonstrated strategic brilliance, forming alliances when necessary and striking decisively when opportunity arose. His combination of diplomacy, patience, and cunning gradually allowed him to outmaneuver rivals and consolidate his power. Beyond military and political maneuvering, Octavius understood the importance of perception. He cultivated an image of legitimacy, respect, and continuity, honoring Caesar's memory while presenting himself as a stabilizing force in a fractured Rome. He balanced the appearance of republican devotion with the reality of centralized authority, gradually extending his influence across the Senate, the provinces, and the military. Every move was calculated to secure loyalty, neutralize opposition, and create a sense of inevitability around his rise. By 27 BC, after years of civil war and political maneuvering, Octavius had achieved what Caesar's murderers had tried, and failed, to prevent: the transformation of Rome. The Republic, as it had existed for centuries, had given way to a new order. Octavius, now Augustus, became the first emperor, wielding unparalleled authority while maintaining the illusion of republican institutions. Through patience, strategy, and a keen understanding of human ambition, he had turned chaos into control, fear into loyalty, and a city divided into the foundation of an empire. The rise of Augustus marked both the fulfillment of Caesar's legacy and the dawn of a new era in Roman history. From the shadows of conspiracy, civil war, and uncertainty, a single man emerged to shape not just Rome, but the very course of civilization, transforming ambition into enduring power and securing a place in history that would echo for millennia.